I'm not going to lie. I just recorded this entire video only to realize it wasn't recording. So I just spent about 30 minutes of my life doing absolutely nothing. Today, we're going to walk through an entire book of the Bible together, and I'm hoping to do it in less than 15 minutes. And I know you're probably thinking, Hannah, how on earth are we going to walk through an entire book of the Bible in less than 15 minutes? Editing Hannah here, and spoiler alert, we did it in under 10 minutes because I am just that good. Well, we're going to walk through the book of Obadiah, and Obadiah is only one chapter. It's only 21 verses long. I know that prioritizing the Bible can be really difficult. It can be really hard to get it in every single day, and I want to help you do that. So today, we're going to do it by doing an entire book of the Bible in a really quick amount of time. And by the time we're done with this, you're going to know more about the Bible. You're going to know more about the history and context of the Bible, and you're going to know why it's important and how to apply it to your life today. So let's get into the book of Obadiah. This is the part that's not always super fun. I know you may not want to, but you need to go read the entire book of Obadiah. So pause this video right here, right now. I know you have 5 minutes to go and read 21 verses. It's not going to take long. I'll be honest, you probably won't understand them, and that's okay. You're going to come back here and we're going to walk through it together. So pause this video, go read Obadiah, and then come right back here.
21 verses later.
Okay, if you're back, that means that you have read the book of Obadiah, and we are going to walk through it verse by verse. The first thing we're going to do is do history and context, and then we'll walk through it one more time so that I can give you some notes and help you apply it to your life today. So for history, for context, the book of Obadiah is a book of prophecy. It was written by Obadiah, and it is Obadiah's prophecy. It's a prophecy of the nation of Edom and their downfall and their destruction. If you think back to the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, at that point in time, Nehemiah comes in to help rebuild the wall around Jerusalem. That wall and that city and those people had to be rebuilt because the Babylonian army came in and completely destroyed the nation of Judah. And when that happened, Edom sat back and watched. And we're going to learn more about all of their other actions and why that was a big deal. But ultimately, what you need to know is that because of those actions, now Obadiah is prophesying the downfall and God's judgment on the nation of Edom. So let's get into it. We're going to start right here in verse 1 and walk all the way through 21 verses. Verse 1 and 2 is really God just declaring war, essentially. He's declaring judgment on Edom. In verse 1, it says, "Rise up and let us go to war against her." That her is the nation of Edom. The other thing you should know is that Edom and Judah are brother nations. When you think back and you think of the story of Jacob and Esau, Jacob was the father of the nation of Judah, and Esau was the father of the nation of Edom. So these were brother nations, and God is declaring war against Edom. In verse 3, you're going to see some metaphors that talk about them living in the clefts of the rock and in your home on the heights. These actually aren't metaphors. These are literal. The nation of Edom was up in the mountains. It was kind of like a fortress city in the mountains. And so they really thought they were invincible. They didn't think anyone could take them down because technically they had the high ground. You know, it was a city that would be really difficult to take over. In verses 5 through 9, we kind of learn what God's plan is, what's going to happen to Edom. We learn that they're going to be pillaged. It even says in here that even a thief, when a thief comes in and steals things, they only take what they want and they leave the other stuff behind. Edom won't be like that. Everything will be gone. So if a thief came in, he's not leaving anything behind. Everything will be destroyed. It even says down in verse 7 that all of your allies are going to betray you. And then it says in verse 8 and verse 9 that even the wise people and even the warriors will be destroyed. There won't be anything left behind. In verses 10 through 14, we finally figure out why exactly they're receiving this judgment. It says at the end of verse 10, because of violence done to your brother Jacob. So Edom is going to be covered in shame and destroyed forever because of the violence that was on the nation of Judah. But what does that have to do with Edom? Well, we're about to find out. In verse 11, it says, "On the day you stood aloof." Edom stood back and watched. They stood back and watched their brother nation be completely destroyed. And then it just continues to get worse. In verse 12, we learn that they mocked them in their distress. In verse 13, they gloated over their misery. And then we even learn at the end of verse 13 that they looted the nation. As the destruction was happening, Edom went in and took the things they wanted and helped with the destruction. So we know that they became a part of the problem. It even says, if you go back up to verse 11, when God references that they stood aloof, it says, you were just like one of them, meaning that Edom became just like one of the other nations that was destroying Judah Because they did nothing, they were a part of the problem. In verses 15 through 18, we learned that God's plan is for Edom to get what it deserves and for Judah to be restored. So Edom is going to receive judgment and Judah is going to receive mercy. And then in 19 through 21, we see that mercy. We see that restoration. God distributes the land back to the people it was intended to, and we see that God puts broken things back together. Even though Edom is destroyed and they've suffered the consequences of their own actions, essentially, God is still a merciful God, and he still comes to Judah's aid and he restores what was broken. And that's the whole book of Judah. We just walked through every single verse. So how on earth does this apply to your life now? Let's start at the very beginning. The first thing that we need to point out is that Edom was a very prideful nation. They thought because they had the high ground, because they were this fortress city in the mountains, they were invincible. My note here says, pride made them feel invincible, but it actually made them blind. They had no idea they could be destroyed so easily. Verses 5 through 9, we learn about how God is planning to destroy them, and it's kind of sounds really harsh, but then we actually learn that it's because of their pride. It's because of their actions. And that made me think of Matthew 23:12. Part of that verse says, those who exalt themselves will be humbled. And I wrote that on this page because in verses 5 through 9, without context, it sounds really harsh. It sounds like God is a mean God. But that's not actually what's happening. God is humbling the nation that was exalting itself. When I'm reading through verses 5 through 9, I want to remember there was a reason that God let this nation be pillaged. There was a reason that God let them be destroyed, and it was because he was in the process of humbling a nation that had exalted themselves, just as Matthew 23:12 says. It really gets good for me around verse 11 when it says that they stood aloof and then that they were basically like one of the others. So you stood back and did nothing and became a part of the problem. That is so easy to do in our world right now. So my note here says, silence in the face of injustice is just participation. That's essentially what God said to Edom, is you stood back and did nothing, so you became a part of the problem. You participated. And they actually did. They joined in on an attack of their brother nation. They joined in on that attack. And this reminded me of Jesus. And I know that's odd, but it reminded me of Jesus because it's the opposite of what Jesus would have done. Edom came in and destroyed, but Jesus came in to rescue. Edom saw us under attack and came in and made it worse, but Jesus saw us under attack and came in and saved us. And I just think that's a really cool picture of the gospel. And then we get to see down in verse 15 through 18, we get to see that God says you're going to suffer the consequences of your actions. God says that you are going to suffer from judgment. But then God also says, I'm a merciful God too. He's a restoring God as well. He doesn't just break things down, he builds things up, and he does it based on judgment and righteousness. And then at the very end, we get to see all of this restoration happen. I know that section would be easy to skip over because it kind of feels like a genealogy, like you don't have to know who the land went to, but this is a record of God's mercy. It's a record, it's proof that God is a restoring God and that he restores broken things just like you and me. That is the entire book of Obadiah. We just walked through the whole thing. You now know how to apply it to your life. I hope that was encouraging for you. If you have other books of the Bible you want us to walk through, leave it in the comments. If you have questions about Obadiah or anything in the Bible, leave them in the comments below and we can talk about it. Make sure you are subscribed. We will do more of these very, very soon. And make sure you check me out on TikTok and Instagram so that you are getting kind of the daily Bible studies that I do over on those platforms. All right, guys, have a good one. Bye.